Recording in progress.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Warringah Electorate Aged Care Forum. Thank you very much for taking the time to be joining with us to discuss this really important topic of aged care and support for those. Many of you joining us today are participating in the aged care system already. You might be carers for loved ones who are in the system, you might work in the system, you might be an aged care provider or a home care provider yourself. So thank you very much for putting some time aside to join us today. I just want to start by acknowledging country and acknowledging elders past and present. The Indigenous culture has a rich heritage of looking after all generations in their culture, and there's a lot that we could be learning from them as we continue the journey of healing. So thank you very much for expressing interest and coming along today. You'll be hearing from Zali Steggal, the federal member for Warringah, and also our special guest today, Danielle Robertson from DR Care Solutions. You'll be hearing from Zali and Danielle about the system as it is at the moment, acknowledging that there are some real challenges and some real issues with the system as it stands. But then we'll also be hearing from Danielle, who's had nearly 30 years of experience in this sector in various roles, and she'll be providing some guidance and some advice. Now, there will be a facility for you to be able to ask questions today. You'll notice the Q&A chat. Now, we understand that for many of you, this may be your first time using Zoom, and we say congratulations and welcome aboard. It can be a little bit daunting, so hopefully you've managed to set it up so you can see Zali and Danielle on screen. Your microphones and your videos today are off, so don't worry if you can't see a microphone or video for yourself. That was intended. But you can ask questions along the way. So you may notice down the bottom there's a little icon, Q&A. And if you type in a question there, you should be able to put that question to Danielle and to Zali. We also received a lot of questions before today, and we will be working through them. So they're the questions that are prepared, and Danielle will be providing some answers for. But if you have those questions today and you want to use that Q&A forum, that's fine too. So with the questions, if we don't get to your question today, please understand that we are recording all those questions. We will be documenting them all, and we will be providing responses back to you. Please try to avoid putting personal cases into the Q&A. We would absolutely be very pleased to help you with your personal situations, but that's best done by you emailing our office. So for those of you not familiar with the address, it's zali.steggal.mp@aph.gov.au. But feel free to contact the office and we will gladly provide assistance to any personal cases. We won't be dealing with them today in today's forum. We have nearly 200 people joining us today, which is fantastic. So we really look forward to the discussion. So I'm going to now hand over to the federal member for Warringah, who's organised today's platform, Zali Steggal. Over to you, Zali.
Thank you, Bronwyn, and hello, everyone. So, this is a really important, this Warringah Aged Care Forum. May I first pay my respects to our Indigenous elders, past, present and emerging, of the land from which I speak, but also may we learn from them so that we can build a safe and prosperous future together. So today we'll be speaking about the issues and obstacles facing our aged care in our community. Because Warringah's population is ageing. Currently, 15% of residents are over 65 years of age, and that percentage will rise. In fact, the Sydney North Health Network is projecting that between 2016 and 2036, so not too far into the future, there'll be an increase of 46.3% in the 65 plus age demographic. Ageing and its challenges touches all of us in our community. Many people in Warringah are in aged care facilities or are supporting family members who are. So it's essential that we have a fit for purpose, compassionate and responsible aged care system that promotes grace, dignity and prosperity in our twilight years. Yet experiences, unfortunately, with the aged care system for many have been disappointing and tragic. The Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety exposed a system of deep flaws, and it's left many behind and many traumatised. We've heard we all heard the stories of shocking betrayals of some of our most vulnerable. The government has agreed to implement many of the 148 recommendations from the Royal Commission, but not all and not in full. So there's still much more that can be done, and I will continue to advocate for that. And of course, COVID-19 has magnified the challenges faced by the sector. The vaccine rollout has been slow. Many are still not protected. And if I could urge everyone to please get vaccinated. Family of people in aged care have been prevented from visiting. There's still not enough registered nurses and staff per patient, and home care wait lists are lengthy, and the process through My Aged Care is convoluted and confusing. So it's been a very emotionally challenging time. So while I welcome the commitment by the government to the increase in funding in the last budget, which will see 80,000 new home care packages over 2 years, there is still a significant backlog and more is needed. And I will continue to advocate for that in Parliament. We have to make sure all the recommendations of the Royal Commission are implemented. So whilst I'll continue to do that, today is really about being practical. Today it's about providing help and practical advice on how to navigate the system. And we're here to talk about how we can overcome the challenges of a growing aged care system to ensure that we provide a level of care most Australians would expect in old age. And so I'm turning to an expert to try and help you with your queries in navigating this system, because when you're having to engage with this system, it's often a very emotional time. So I'm delighted to be joined today with Danielle Robertson to talk about how we can fix the system and how to navigate the system. Danielle Robertson was CEO of Darling Angel, Australia's only national group specialising in home and family care and support services for all types of care. And after almost 29 years in the family business, Danielle exited the business when it was acquired in September 2014. Danielle's areas of expertise include aged care, disability care, home care, retirement living, and family business. She has a broad and comprehensive understanding of the industry and the relevant and often complicated government legislation associated with it. Danielle is offering us, and we're incredibly lucky, 35 plus years of extensive experience to the care industry, and we're incredibly grateful to have her. She's now with DR Care Solutions, and we'll be able to pass on details if you'd like to follow up on any queries. But Danielle, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Zali, very much for the opportunity to speak to your constituents about this very complex and frustrating and emotional issue of aged care. You know, I've been in the industry for 30 years, as you said, 35 years, just this past August, and I've seen significant changes over that time. My passion is home care, and trying to keep people at home with good quality care in place and support services is my passion. That's not always possible though. People get to a point where they do need to have additional care, and if they haven't got the funding that they would require either from government or from their own pocket, you know, we look at seeing it how they can get the best care at end of life. We're seeing significant changes that people aren't going into residential aged care until much later. So traditionally people would start having a life event or an illness and would move into residential aged care and live out their life there. That used to be 3, 4, 5 years that people would remain in residential aged care. We're seeing around 18 months is the average of people going into residential aged care. So people are remaining at home much longer with home care in place. So the key issues that, you know, the high level sort of things that we should be looking at, the issues that came out of the Royal Commission were from the aged care reform, the issues that you need to be aware of and your constituents, that there are 5 pillars to support aged care reforms. And they are home care, which we're all aware of, residential aged care services and sustainability, residential aged care quality and safety, the aged care workforce and governance. And my biggest passion there and concern is the workforce and making sure that we've got enough qualified people that can actually do the work and want to do the work and for the pay that they're being paid. There is a significant shortage of skilled workers. So we've really got to think about where we're going to get these workers from. The issue of skilled workers in the future is not clear because of COVID-19 and the border shutting, the impact which has impacted migrants from coming in, and traditionally a lot of migrants are doing this type of work. The poor salary levels, and it's hard work. It's bloody hard work to be a carer. The home care packages fundings in the budget, however, that was 80,000 packages they're going to release. That's 40,000 over 2 years. That's fine that the people are going to be getting their funding. Once again, where are they going to get the skilled workers to do the actual work? It could mean up to 24 months wait for those people who are wanting to move into having home care. With those with their own funds will have more options and can start the services quicker, private fee for service. The aging care services funding model, so going into residential aged care, that's being changed and challenged. It's not been fully addressed. And there's a strong likelihood that people with money are going to have to contribute to their aged care funding. There's not one continuum of care either. So from home care, integrating home care, retirement communities, and residential aged care and end of life care, there's just not one service that can provide everything in one place. So what does the aging care sector look like currently? Community care, there's 840,000 people in Australia who are receiving Commonwealth Home Support. So there's about 1,500 providers that are doing that. Home care, there's 175,000 people who are receiving home care packages. 800 are approved providers. Retirement communities, there's 200,000 people, 780 providers. Land lease communities, there's 100,000 people in those, with only 32 providers in that area. Residential aged care, 230,000 people and 800 providers, and 1.55 million in total, which is 6% of the population, are receiving those services. But one really interesting fact is that there's a total of 2.7 million informal carers, and that's 10% of the population. If the government had to replace all that, it would cost billions and billions of dollars. So we thank those who are caring for their aging and disabled loved ones, because it takes the stress and pressure off the government. So that's sort of in a nutshell where the aged care landscape is. So over to you, Zali.
Okay, well, I guess for one, if we go through the questions we've received, what's the current process to get started in the aged care system?
It depends on where you're at, but if you're over the age of 65 and you're pretty well, keep the status quo going. You might want to pay for a cleaner to come in and help you support to keep you at home. You might look at Meals on Wheels or some other, pre-packaged meals. But if you have any ailments, or if you're concerned about loneliness, or you're not able to drive anymore, if you've had a life event and you're needing some personal care, or things are changing that you're a bit unsure about what the process is and you want to get into the system, you need to contact My Aged Care. My Aged Care is a government service that everyone over the age of 65 can access. And basically you phone up, you need your Medicare card. If you have an adult child or a partner who is also looking for care, they can become your designated representative, and they will need their Medicare card to register. You can register online, or you can register over the phone. A lot of older Australians prefer to speak to a real person, so they will get on the phone. And My Aged Care is open from 8 till 8, Monday to Friday, and 10 till 2 on a Saturday. And that's your starting point, and that just gets you into the system. They'll ask you a few questions about your health and where you're at in your aging journey. And they will then decide whether you need to be assessed by a RAS assessor. Now, a RAS assessor is a regional assessment service, and that's for entry-level home care, and that's for Commonwealth Home Support. And that could be transport, it could be social support, it could be Meals on Wheels, it could be minor modifications. You might just want a rail in your bathroom. It could be some domestic cleaning. It could be a bit of gardening. It's very basic starting level of home care. If you've got a little bit more illness, or if you had a further, maybe a fractured hip, or you've been given a dementia diagnosis, or you've developed a traumatic injury of some sort, or a degenerative disease, it's likely that you'll need to move to the next stage, which is through ACAT, the Aged Care Assessment Team. They then do another assessment. If you haven't already had a RAS assessment and been given Commonwealth Home Support, then you'll need to move to that next level and be reassessed. And this is the problem that a lot of families are finding, that you're being assessed and reassessed. And if you having given a lower level home care package and you need a higher level, you need to be reassessed again. So this is where there's been a bit of a disconnect for ageing Australians, and their frustration levels have been reassessed 2 or 3 times. So if you do need to be reassessed for a higher level of care and support, there's 4 levels of home care. Level 1 is your entry level, and that's about $8,500 to $9,000 a year that you can spend on government approved services. And that's the same sort of services, but you have choice, and you can make a decision as to what you have and spend your money on. Level 2 is around $13,000 to $14,000 a year. Level 3 is around $32,000 to $34,000 a year, depending on where you're at. And also there's supplements in there for dementia care supplements and other supplements, Department of Vet Affairs. And level 4 is your highest level of home care package, and that's about $52,000 to $54,000 a year. Now that you think, oh gee, that's quite a lot of money, but a level 4 home care package, you'd only really receive about 15 or 16 hours a week. And if you're a level 4 home care package holder, you're generally needing a lot more care than that 16 to 18 hours can offer you. If you do self-managed funding, you might be able to get a few more hours, maybe 20 to 22 hours a week, which is still not much when you're needing 168 hours a week of care, which is 24/7 care, and you're only getting a little bit subsidised by the government. And often I'll say to people is that if you've got some funding behind you, whether it's the kids, the adult kids who can support you financially, or if you've got some money put aside, then spend that for your own care. And that can be added to your government funded care to give you the right amount of care and keep you out of residential aged care for as long as possible. For those on pensions, unfortunately, you are limited for choice, and you do need to wait for your government funded package to come along. And that's where family carers come in, become really, really key on that. And maybe some volunteers in your local community can help you as well. So yeah, that's sort of very, very quick. I mean, we could spend hours and hours going through the whole aged care system, Zali, and that's a very quick sort of, to get into the system, get into the queues. The best thing to do is start with My Aged Care.
But also quite important, I think, for family members. So adult children who are looking at their parents of, what are the signs they need to be looking for? What is the assistance they need to start thinking of providing their loved ones? Is really good to understand that aspect of starting with cleaning and support services like cleaning and food and all those things, and really getting into so it really is important to get into the system.
It is, and have the discussion. I think the first thing is to have the discussion with your aging or disabled loved one about you're concerned about them, and particularly through COVID, we haven't been able to actually get in and see our loved ones. So we might have done some Zoom sessions or FaceTime, but it hasn't been that close encounter and going in and looking in the fridge, making sure that they are actually showering and that they're doing the laundry and that they're taking their medications. So I think coming up to Christmas and after this whole COVID lockdown, it's going to be quite a surprise for a number of adult children catching up with their parents again and seeing them and seeing a deterioration in their condition, whether it be cognitive condition or that their frailty, and having those discussions saying, I'm really concerned about, do you need some support? And I would avoid the word care. A lot of older Australians don't like the word care. They don't think they need it. So it's actually supporting them to remain at home. How can we support you to remain at home? Let's go through this government process. Let's see what we can get. You've paid your taxes over the years. Let's see what we can get back. We might need to supplement it, but just working, practically with your loved one to make sure that you're getting that right outcome and starting the process as early as possible.
Yeah. So starting with home care, who is eligible to obtain government funded services?
Everyone is eligible, even James Packer. So from, Commonwealth Home Support Services, that's not means tested at all. So, I mean, it's heavily government subsidised. So if you have means to pay, if you need your home modified with ramps and rails and you need products and equipment for your home, it might be a new bed and that sort of thing, you will be offered that and you'll have to supplement that payment. So the government will heavily subsidise it, but there's still quite a significant, that you can get from the government. If you move into the home care system, so the home care package system, that's means tested. So if you are earning a certain amount or you have assets at a certain amount, you will be charged a means tested fee. And that's all calculated via Centrelink. And I highly, highly recommend that if you are filling in any forms for Centrelink, that you get some really good financial advice to help you and make sure that you're putting in the right information. I've seen clients who have filled in the wrong information. They've been charged huge means tested fees, and in fact, they haven't needed to be paying that at all. So get really good advice on that.
Okay, so maybe we'll be able to share some information of where, where advice can be found for that.
Yes.
Now, look, we obviously, the discussion about really long wait times, what aged care help can families get while they're on that wait list? Because we hear of terrible stories of incidents of such delay. Lower level packages, fee for service, what is the interim solution for families that are waiting?
Yes, look, I mean, once you get into the Commonwealth Home Support System, often you can stay there until your higher level package comes in. So you might be asking for a reassessment and you've got some Commonwealth Home Support. There are long wait lists for Commonwealth Home Support too. So you might be assessed at getting rails. That's fine, but you might be waiting for 6, 8, 10 weeks for a rail to be inserted because the provider that has the funding has a wait list. They're working through as quickly as they can, but there is a shortage of providers in the Commonwealth Home Support Program. If you are offered a lower level package, sometimes if you haven't had any Commonwealth Home Support previously, grab it, take it, use it all up, because if you're holding your funding, the government is saying, well, why would you need a higher level package because you haven't used your lower level package? Use up your requirement, get reassessed. If they can see that you're using it and that you really need the help and support, and particularly those living alone, I think that's where the government looks at the priority queue and says, okay, they're living alone, they've got no living relatives that can pop in, so they get higher on the queue priority. If there's more family support or if they're living with other family members, it might be that they're in a medium level in the priority queue. So I'm not sure how the priority queue works with My Aged Care, but they are, that's how they work. And a lot of families will just start fee for service, and that's pretty immediate, that we can get clients assessed and care started very quickly, in a couple of days. So, but it's finding the right provider who's got the right carer profile that's going to match your loved one. It's all very well to say, yes, we've got a carer available in your area, but if it's a wrong match, it's not going to work.
So obviously, I think you've touched on it, but the funding available for home care services and why there's a wait, obviously it's a high level of demand.
Huge demand. And there's a tsunami of older Australians coming. We knew this was happening. The government knew this was going to be happening. Way back in 2010 in the Productivity Commission, they were saying, look, we've got a problem and we need to be starting to deal with this now, including that workforce issue. That is going to be this should have been dealt with probably 20 years ago. Making sure that we had enough people coming into Australia that were skilled, suitably skilled. It's all very well to have people here and migrants here, but we need to get them suitably skilled and trained to be able to work with our Australians to improve their English, because a lot of older Australians have hearing issues and sight impaired. So it's very important that they can actually understand what the carers are saying and that they feel comfortable having a stranger in their home.
Yeah. And so one question we have is, what about ACAT packages? Where do they come in?
ACAT packages are the home care packages. So there's the 4 levels, yes. So ACAT is the team. Well, all these acronyms are so ridiculous, but ACAT means Aged Care Assessment Team. They come and do an ACAT assessment and they prepare a report. They put the recommendations for funding, and then you wait for your funding to come through. So that's how that works.
You've touched on a bit of the quality, but who's keeping an eye on the quality of aged care by home care providers, and who sanctions them for non-compliance? I mean, that is a real fear for families and older Australians, is obviously staying safe.
Yes, look, the Quality Commission have assessors that go in intermittently to home care providers as well as residential aged care providers. So they're ad hoc. So they go in and so you've got to become an accredited. If you are getting government funding, you need to become an accredited aged care approved provider. So if you're in that system, the government will keep an eye on you pretty regularly. If there's anything, when they go and do an assessment of your organisation, if there's anything that is non-compliant, they'll request that be fixed. and they'll come back in and reassess. So it's like an audit. It's almost like an ISO audit, ISO 2000, the ISO accreditation, very on a regular basis. There's SNAP audits that you don't know that they're coming, and particularly in residential aged care, which has created a bit of a problem through COVID too, because they can't just snap, arrive and go and do an audit on a place. They have been doing them, but they've been giving them some notice. But if anyone's sanctioned or non-compliance, particularly sanctioned, they lose their government funding until the issue's fixed. They can't admit any more people into that residential aged care facility. So the government are keeping a pretty close eye on the sector. There are providers that aren't approved aged care providers, so they're private providers that don't want to go through and get government funding. So you need to do your own due diligence on those. Check where they've come from, who are the owners, make sure that they're recruiting appropriately, that they're not using contractors, that they're not just, running from a mobile phone, that they've got a set office, that they're running professionally. Check how they train their staff. So it's actually you doing a bit of work yourself if you're going to a provider that's not an approved aged care provider.
Yeah, and obviously the impact of COVID through this. So home care providers have still been able to carry out their services, but obviously there's been some requirements. So, and you touched on a little bit before about obviously with the lockdown and the lack of family interaction and visits, there is going to be a likely deterioration of care, the isolation, maybe a rise in depression for people who, the not having the family contact.
Yeah.
How is that going from the carrying out of the services with COVID?
Yeah, look, I think basically home care has continued. If somebody needs significant amount of care, say 24/7 care or 12 hours a day of care, what the home care providers have been doing is been limiting the number of team members going into that home. So if traditionally they might have had 5 carers going into that client on a rotating basis, but because of COVID, they've probably selected 2 or 3 that rotate, and just so that they're only doing that client, right? So they've got their own bubble. So they're not going from client to client to client. It's been much harder for Commonwealth Home Support, where they've had cleaners who are going for an hour and a half to Mrs. Brown and an hour and a half to Mrs. Smith, and household to household. So a lot of people have stopped those services. But those that need care need it, it's not going to just go away. In relation to social isolation, we've seen a massive increase of people asking about companionship. So it's not so much about care, it's more about social support and keeping those people touching base with them, cooking them a home cooked meal, just having a conversation, tea and company. That's a lot of, the time that people have previously they've been able to get to the golf club or to the bowls club or to their, their own club. It could be that they're not able to get out and socialise. They can't go to the local coffee shop to sit down and have a coffee, and their friends can't meet with them. So, a lot of it has been telecommunications, FaceTime, Zooms, that sort of thing, but it's still not the same as being in person, being touched, held, sensory. A lot of clients miss that, a hug. It's amazing that people just say, I just want a hug. I just want to be touched. I just want to be massaged. I need my hair brushed, that sort of thing. So it's, I think there's going to be a huge amount of increase in mental health. And it's not just the older people, it's right across the board in Australia. You can see it on the news. They're talking about the rise of mental health issues, and this is going to be a problem. It's going to be not just for the next 12 months. This is going to be carrying on for years and years and years to come.
Yes. Look, and what is the eligibility for informal carers to be paid? Because as you said, a huge proportion of Australians are informal carers,
Yes.
and there is some minimal financial supplements or becoming a paid carer through a home care provider.
Yes.
So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Look, I mean, if you feel that you'd like to have a carer supplement, or, there's very small amounts of money being a carer, being a primary carer. And there's some links that I've sent through previously that the team can share with your constituents about how to apply for them. It's through Department of Social Services, and that there's carer supplement, there's carer support, but it's not huge amounts of money. It's a couple of $100, I think, a fortnight or a week. It's not huge, but it does help to, if you've got to take time off work to be with a loved one and you are that primary carer for that person, it helps, a little bit helps, and particularly if you're maybe working part-time, that will supplement you. Yeah.
And look, it's not easy being an informal carer. So what is there support for the carer? So who's caring for the carer? Because
yes, I always say that.
About that. What support's available for there? And I guess it's emotional and resources support, because the knowing, you know, the fear of doing the wrong thing or not providing the right care would also be quite, you know, quite a concern. So what supports are there?
Yeah, look, I mean, Carers Australia and Carers New South Wales, all the states, you know, have got their own carers portal that can support carers. Dementia Australia, fantastic. So if somebody's been diagnosed with, you know, a cognitive decline or some sort of form of dementia, that would be your first place of call, because they've got the education, the toolkits to support a carer through that process, what to expect, how to manage, you know, some strategies on managing your loved one as they deteriorate, you know, where to seek help and when to seek help. You know, we're seeing that more and more, not so much for frail age, but more for the cognitive decline, because 50% of that aging population do living with cognitive decline. So we all need to be aware of it.
People generally wait to seek help?
Yes, sometimes they do. Sometimes they seek it too late, and you know, it's sometimes too late even to get home care in, because you know, the safety of the person, safety of the home, you know, and they might be wandering, they might have aggressive behaviours, you know, sometimes it's too late. So that's why I say seek help early, you know, plan ahead. If you've been given a diagnosis, start that planning process now. There's no point putting your head in the sand. Seek resources, understand what the situation is, what's there to help you as a carer, because if a carer gets ill, you've got two people you've got to care for. So I always say we've got to care for the carer so that we've got, you know, that person who's well and supported to be able to continue looking after their aging or disabled loved one.
Yeah. Now, obviously, retirement communities and aged care facilities, maybe we get a broad brush, how does the retirement living sector work?
Yes.
And obviously for people is, how do you choose the right facility?
It's interesting. A lot of people think a retirement village is residential aged care. It isn't. So retirement living or communities are for people who might be in their like late 50s, if that, but 60s to 70s, who are fit, well, who are, you know, have retired or semi-retired. They might be still working part-time. It's independent living, but it's in a community where there's social activities happening. You can do as much or as little as you want. There's usually, you know, swimming pools and cafes on site, and there's, you know, planned activities, bingo, men's shed, all sorts of different activities for those in their retirement years. The process of finding the right retirement community is really choice. It's like you're going to buy a home. You need to look out, you know, for all sorts of costs involved. Make sure you get really good advice, legal advice, particularly around the contract, because there's no government funding for retirement villages, none at all. You can bring your home care package in and use that in a retirement village, but there's no government funding for retirement villages. And retirement villages generally have a deferred management fee. So when you depart or exit from a retirement village, a proportion of the sale goes back to the management of that retirement community. So it's not like where you're choosing residential aged care, if you're paying a lump sum, which is called a RAD, refundable accommodation deposit, that is totally refundable, and it's actually guaranteed by the government. So if you're paying $550,000 for a room in a residential aged care facility, the estate on the time that person leaves will get that $550,000 back. That's not to say there's not other fees, such as, you know, your daily care fees, there's extra services fees, and don't forget that means tested fee as well, if you're applicable for that. So,
I might just ask you, sorry, Danielle, to just turn your volume up a little bit, because obviously we've got a few people that are very much impacted by what you're saying, that are really, you know, people are really appreciating all your advice.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. That's okay. So yes, with residential aged care, finding the right facility for you is very, very important. Do your research. Once again, check the whether they've been sanctioned, if they've been non-compliant. Find out what's right for that person. You know, they might be living with dementia, but do they like to be outside? Do they like walking paths? Do they like gardening? So if you're in an aged care facility that doesn't have gardens or pathways, that's not going to suit your loved one. If they enjoy a coffee on site, in a little cafe, does the facility have that? What's the carer ratio? Do they have nurses on site 24/7? Do they have leisure staff? What sort of activities are provided? How large are the rooms? Are they shared rooms? Do you have to share a bathroom? So there's lots of factors that you need to take into consideration when choosing that. And my number one thing is give it a good smell when you walk through the door, because that shows you a sense of cleanliness and whether you want to be living there with your long term. So yeah, that's the key point. But yes, and in a location where family and friends can visit. There's no point you saying I'm going to go up to Queensland if you're lived all your life on the northern beaches and moving away from family and friends, because significant numbers of people in nursing homes and residential aged care facilities don't have visitors. So please, if you are looking at that, make sure that you're close to your aging and loved ones that they can visit on a regular basis. Not at the moment, but once COVID lifts, yes, that would be.
And what impact does that have on actually well-being? Is that ability to have visitors needs to be considered as an integral part of that decision-making of the facility at the end of the day, because that has a profound impact on mental health and enjoyment of living in that centre.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I say to a lot of people heading into retirement, when they say, gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I say, go down to your local aged care facility, ask if anyone doesn't have any visitors, and you become their friend, their visitor. It's good for you and it's really good for the person. It might only be once a week, twice a week, once a fortnight, but it's a regular face that's coming to visit them. But find out who doesn't have visitors, and that's key. You're hearing of so many people. I think at one stage I was saying 50% of people in nursing homes don't have visitors, and I mean it's been pretty tough through COVID, but traditionally people don't. It can be a dump and run situation if people are just so over it that they've just got to leave their loved one there, or that they just move away, or that they just can't face the reality of going into a secure dementia area. It's quite confronting, and that can really affect them. But as I say, it shouldn't be worrying you. You go and do it for your loved one. They might not know who you are, but it's good for you as an individual.
A major part of this care is the ratio of registered nurses to carers to residents. I've spoken about it in Parliament on a motion. I strongly support calling for a mandatory ratio. It is a recommendation of the Royal Commission. Can you explain why that's so important, the impact that has on level of care, why it's important, and whether how is it looking for that to be brought in?
Well, I believe that everyone is attempting to look at funding and how they're going to be able to fund it. I think that's been the big limitation for a lot of aged care providers is the amount of money that it costs to labour costs. But look, essentially they should be assessing the care needs of the individual and making, so shouldn't be a mandatory amount of staff. It should be who are the residents there, and making sure there's enough staff to be able to cope with at least, they were talking about 200 minutes of care. If they're in 24-hour care, if that's all they're getting, that's pretty appalling. I would like to see that, in home care, it's 24/7. Somebody's there for you one-on-one the whole time. But in residential aged care, it might be 1 to 6. 1 to 6 is a pretty good ratio. But, I've seen some 1 to 5. And some as high as 1 to 12.
So can you just explain the difference? So what's the difference between a registered nurse and what additional skills and obviously knowledge that they bring?
Yes.
But also even talking about those ratios, what that means in layman's term is that when you're saying 1 to 5, 1 to 6, it means that your loved one will only be able to be cared for a limited amount of time out of a 24-hour day. Correct. The rest of that time they are on their own.
Virtually, and that's so sad. So registered nurses are traditionally, in the last few years in residential aged care have been caught up doing paperwork and medication. And that is not what they were there. That's not why they went into registered nursing in the first place. They wanted to be able to provide one-on-one care and provide good quality clinical care and knowledge. So I think what we're looking at is maybe training up other people that can do the administration and medication management and get the nurses back on the floor and being more engaged in the residents' care, checking for wounds, checking for any pressure areas, checking, you know, where a person's at in their clinical journey of aged care, whether they need a GP to come in, you know. So I see that that is integral and important, that we have more registered nurses on the ground. And actually, I had an idea of GPs who are coming out of training should spend 1 year mandatory in an aged care facility, buddying up with a registered nurse, so that they're getting a bird's eye view of what's actually happening in aged care and actually having extra support. I don't think that's ever going to come through as a recommendation, but I think it would be a damn good idea if we could consider it. But so just having that clinical knowledge is really important, and to see things before they happen. Yes, carers are trained and they're skilled, but they don't have this clinical knowledge that a registered nurse has. So I envisage, I'd like to see, you know, registered nurses at least 24 hours a day. Some facilities are doing that. Some have them on call, which worries me, because how quickly can someone who's on call get to a facility if there's a need? Do they need to then call an ambulance? And it might not have needed an ambulance and clog up our you know, the emergency departments, when it could have just been a clinical nurse going, oh, actually, no, she just needs rolling over and some massage or something like that, you know, or whatever it be, or some oxygen. So, you know, I think having that clinical knowledge on site is imperative. In relation to ratios, 1 to 5 is pretty good. So that means 1 carer to having 5 residents that they're caring for. So it might be showering them. They might need a second person to shower a person that's immobile. So they'd be having 2 people to 1 person while they're doing that, undertaking the personal care and hygiene. And you know, they are bringing in leisure and lifestyle staff as well, who is like support staff. They're not clinically trained, but that's more the companionship and the activities. So I'm seeing a gradual increase in those staffing on that level, from activities of interest and things like that, to keep people occupied. So that's where the ratio may increase. It's not so much carer to resident. It's more going to be how many staff have they got on site and how many residents have they got on site, and divide that by the numbers. So that's how I think that's going to work. But we are seeing an increase in the staffing levels at the moment. But once again, funding.
The one thing we do know, that things can change really quickly for families. And they, all of a sudden, the family can find themselves in a situation where they've got to make important decisions very quickly. So obviously, you've touched on it, the importance of forward planning, contingency planning, having those conversations before you're at crisis point is incredibly important, but also knowing where to go and find the help. Are there general, you know, industry or areas, better places to start looking for information for people?
Look, I mean, the internet is full of useful and useless information. So, you know, take it all with a grain of salt. As I said, My Aged Care is a good place to start. It is quite complex and confusing. Reach out to people like myself who are in the industry and know, you know, the industry inside, outside, upside down. But in the planning ahead stage, there's a few things that I recommend families look at, and that's their estate planning. Make sure that they've got their powers of attorney, their enduring guardianship, their wills done. 50% of Australians still don't have wills, which I can't believe. And also thinking about their advanced care planning. So if they're on life support or can't communicate their wishes, what are their wishes? And that should be starting in their people who have got kids, so 30s, 40s, 50s, you should be thinking about your estate planning. If you're wanting to make sure you've got enough funding down the track, get a financial planner. There's, you know, there's some great financial planners out there who are aged care accredited, and particularly those moving into residential aged care, you do need an aged care accredited financial advisor to give you those strategies as to what's the best way, from tax effectiveness and also whether you need to sell the family home or keep it, rent it, that sort of thing. So planning ahead is key, but yes, certainly My Aged Care, you know, Dementia Australia, if you have any concerns around, you know, cognition. There's a huge number of Carers Australia in each of the states, Services New South Wales, the government funded websites such as Department of Human Services, Centrelink has got a lot of information on it as well. So just start appraising yourself, talk to people who've been through the system, talk to friends, don't take their advice, but just, you know, hear their stories and then make your own opinion. because, you know, what's good for your mum might not be good for their mum. So, you know, they might think that the glitzy, glamoury aged care facility is perfect for their mum, but your mum might be a pensioner who doesn't want the glitzy, glamoury. She just wants really good home style place. Don't look at the bricks and mortar. She just wants good quality care and medical assistance if needed. So, you know, the planning ahead is key. And I say it's never too early to plan ahead, even for end of life planning. Think about what you want at end of life, where you want to be passing, whether you want to be at home, whether you want to be in residential aged care, whether you want to be in hospital, whatever it is, make sure it's documented and that the family know. There's nothing worse than a life event happening and the family have no idea what their loved one wants and they can't communicate it. So then it's up to the kids, the adult kids, to make those decisions on your behalf. So if you don't want somebody else making those decisions, make your decisions now, make them heard, and make sure that everyone in your family, and particularly your power of attorney and enduring guardian, are across your wishes, and review it annually. Very important, review this annually, because your power of attorney or enduring guardian, who might have been a friend of yours, might have passed away or developed dementia. So review that on a regular basis. I say around your birthday, go through all your documentation, you know, have your medical checks all around that time, so that you'll never forget that around your birthday, that's when you know, checking on all your plans.
Yeah. So I've got from Anne Howard, what aged care applies to gold card holders? Is it different to My Aged Care?
It's actually works in parallel with My Aged Care. DVA work very closely with My Aged Care. Often you'll get a little bit more support, as in funding. So, you know, it's best to speak to your DVA person, and if you're a gold card holder, you can get some other benefits. Working in with providers who are, you know, providing care through My Aged Care as aged care providers. It's more in relation to the funding side of things for DVA gold card holders, and they're few and far between these days. We're losing a lot of our veterans and their loved ones, so you know, they are supported.
Okay. From an anonymous attendee, home care package providers charge 20% plus in fees to manage the package. As I understand it, there's often sometimes entry-level fees and then exit fees if you need to change. Is it possible to self-manage a home care package? And if so, what is the process?
Yes, you can self-manage the process, but if you're holding the government funds, it still needs to go through like a trust fund. You know, you just don't get the cash in your hand and say, okay, I'm going, you know, I've got my $8,000, I'm going to do what I want with it. There's still, if you self-manage, it still needs to go through an approved provider that holds the funds. Generally speaking, it's a lower percentage than a home care provider. But if you also self-manage, you also need to manage your rosters, your carers, you need to recruit all your carers. So I find a lot of people who start with self-managed end up coming through and going through an approved provider. They'll pay the 20% because they're going, it's such a headache, I haven't got time for this, I'm working full time. But yes, look, I mean, some providers, and I'm not going to name names, but some of them are charging as high as 50% admin and case management fees. I've actually got refunds on some of my clients' case management back, because they'd been charging nearly $1,000 a month for case management. And when I asked when the case manager last met with the family, they'd never met with them. They'd sent an email or phoned them once a month. And I said, well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. I want a refund for my client for case management. So you need a good advocate as well to make sure that you're getting the best outcome. There should be no entry fees for home care packages, and there should be no exit fees. If a provider is saying that they're going to charge an exit fee, I wouldn't use that provider in the first place.
Is there a way of comparing providers? So is it just a matter of searching on the internet, or is there obviously somewhere where people can go and find out more about providers? My Aged Care lists all the aged care approved providers, but you put in your postcode and you might get 52. So how do you know which ones are good and which ones are bad? So, you know, I say do your due diligence on it. You know, just spend a little bit of time digging around their website, ringing them, asking them, you know, how they operate, what their fees are, and do your own comparison. Don't get overwhelmed by phoning, you know, 10. I mean, that's ridiculous. If you can choose 3 and do your due diligence, you'll have a good feel from the first phone call. So how do they treat you from the first phone call is likely the way they'll treat you right through. Check their pricing. You know, some are reasonably priced, some are exceptionally expensive, and some are really cheap, and you're thinking, well, why are they really cheap? How much are they paying their carers? So, you know, you get what you pay for. I always say go mid-range, you know, and do it on a casual basis. You're not actually
So even if you sign up with a home care package provider, you don't have to stay with them. If you're really unhappy, you can move your package to another provider. Not that you want to be doing that on a regular basis, and give them a chance to settle in, because it does take time to settle in and get a care team up and running. But if you're not happy with them, you do not have to remain with them. A lot of people have that misconception, oh, I've signed up with so-and-so, now I'm stuck with them. No, you're not. You've got a choice. And in relation to self-management, it's for some people are great and can manage that themselves. If you've got the time and the energy, yes, you can save a bit of money, but once again, you've got to make sure you can recruit and make sure you manage those the funding coming through from the trust fund, to make sure that you've got the right providers, sending through invoices that have got ABNs, and that they're an approved provider coming through that way to get the funding. So it's still a bit of work for self-managed, but it certainly can be done.
Yeah, so one question online is when family members are spending a lot of time dealing with a loved one's provider, trying to sort out the roster of who comes in and when, and even after this, something's agreed upon, there's deviations and it doesn't happen. Is that common? And would if that's happening with large organisations, is that less likely with a smaller organisation? What's the experience around that?
Yeah, look, I do find the smaller local providers are more in tune with their clients, that they have a lower ratio, once again, of case managers to the number of clients. With the larger providers that are national, they tend to have a lot more clients under their banner. So each case manager might have up to 200 clients, whereas a smaller provider might have only 20 clients that they're dealing with. So once again, you get what you pay for. You deal with your case manager, make sure that if you're not happy, keep going back. Just keep going back and asking the same question. If you're not getting a different answer, ask the question slightly different. Ask to speak to the manager. If you're not getting the results that you want or expect, then take it, escalate it. And they are obliged to document any incidents or complaints or anything like that, and that's part of their approval process. So they've got to present their complaints register to the quality agency when they come and do an audit. So if there's the same sort of complaints coming through all the time, they're going to question that. So, but please don't be afraid to ask those questions and escalate it.
Yeah.
Or change providers.
Yes, I have from Graham Taylor, whose wife's been in care, and it's been 12 weeks since he's been able to visit, and unfortunately this is just the heartbreaking aspect of this lockdown. I guess the question is, if loved ones and if all members are vaccinated, are fully vaccinated, and the staff can be, and maybe this is also a discussion of where we know staffing vaccination ratio is at, do you anticipate the need for visitors to be permitted, so that we really need to progress this situation?
Yeah, at the moment, the government sets it. The health department's actually setting this. It's not the actual aged care provider. So I feel for them because they're trying to manage this process as well. They're trying to get their staff vaccinated. I think there's still 30% of aged care staff that don't have their first vaccination. I think they've been given till the 17th of September to have that. I think once they see that ratio and the percentage go up, then they'll probably open to loved ones, but you might only be able to see your loved one in their room, so not in the communal areas, unless everyone's fully vaxxed. So I think at the moment the health department are actually guiding that. As hard as it's been, it's devastating for families, and particularly at end of life care. There's been some special dispensations where people have been allowed to go in and sit with their dying loved one, but essentially no one's been able to see their loved ones, and that's been challenging. And as I said, for everyone, it's not just the families, but it's actually the staff as well. They feel for the families. Yeah.
So I guess I've got one last technical aspect is, can a means test be revisited if it's becoming really burdensome? Is that an aspect that can be challenged or revisited?
Yes, it can be challenged and it can be revisited, but once they hit the cap, there is a cap of, I think, $64,000, around 64,000. So that's a lifetime cap. So once that's reached, there's no more means tested fees. So, it can be reassessed. You really get involved with the Centrelink, get your financial advisor to work on your behalf and advocate on your behalf if you've got any questions or concerns around that.
Well, unfortunately, I think there's still so many questions out there, but I'd like to say thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope it's given you a better understanding of the aged care system and where you can get some further information and help if you need it. Danielle, you're just a wealth of knowledge and experience. Thank you so much for giving us your time and clarity in answering some of these questions, but also assisting us in getting ready. As you said, preparing, planning ahead is so important. Now, we will provide some links to everybody about some of the things discussed today and some new links. But I have to say, a lot of the comments that have come through are around loneliness and the current situation we're in. It's incredibly tough at the moment, the lockdown and the separation we're feeling, the concern about family members that aren't receiving visitors, and then also loved ones at home still isolated. And there's a real concern around that. So I have to, please stay connected with family and friends, at least via your phone. If everyone could be encouraged to please contact my my office here on 9977 6411, and we can put you in contact with and some direction for some support groups. And look, during periods of lockdown, we've always also put in place a system of callback from volunteers to create that regular contact with people in our community that are vulnerable and isolated. So please reach out to my office. We're here to help, and we're highly concerned and aware of the isolation many people are feeling at the moment and the frustration around not being able to visit with loved ones. So please get in touch with my office. Danielle, thank you so much for spending so much time with us answering questions. There may be a few more coming in writing, and to everybody we will share all some links to some of the information provided. Thank you.
Thanks, Zali. And I'm happy to answer any of the questions too that come through, and just send those back to your constituents so that they've got, the answers to their questions. So I'm happy to do that.
Thank you so much.